Lonely rancher bought a pregnant girl not knowing the baby wasn't human. The wind had teeth in that stretch of nowhere, sharp, dry, and biting. Eldon Pike's ranch sat crooked on the edge of the dust-hollow basin where even the sagebrush grew sideways. The land felt watched as if it remembered things no man should have buried. He stood on the porch shotgun across one arm, eyes fixed on the cabin's side door. Lena hadn't screamed once. Not during labor, not during birth, not even now when something inside that room let out a sound too quiet for a newborn. It wasn't crying. It was listening. Eldon stepped inside. The oil lamp flickered low. The girl, barely more than skin and breath, lay curled around a still bundle swaddled in a tattered blanket. The baby turned its head slowly. Eyes black as coal pits stared up at him. No whites, no tears, just awareness. Eldon didn't flinch, but his grip on the shotgun tightened. He'd seen that kind of stillness once in a dying man who refused to close his eyes. He exhaled once low and tight. Well, he muttered, "You ain't no calf, that's for damn sure." And somewhere out past the ridge the horses started screaming. The sun, a molten brand, seared the vast, unbroken sky over Redemption Gulch. It was a desolate outpost, a few sagging wooden structures clinging to the edge of the known world where the dust tasted of desperation and every transaction felt like a piece of a soul being bartered away. Eldon Pike knew this taste well. His own soul, he figured, had been mostly dust and regret for years now, ever since Martha took ill and the frontier had swallowed her whole. He was a man carved from the silence of his widowed ranch, hardened by years of solitary labor, his face a landscape of etched lines, his eyes the color of worn saddle leather. He had ridden into this nameless trading post only for supplies for flour, and shot certainly not for human connection. But then he saw her. The crowd gathered was a coarse tapestry of grizzled miners, weary homesteaders, and opportunistic drifters, their faces flushed with cheap whiskey and baser curiosity. At the center, on a makeshift crate, stood a girl barely more than a slip of a thing swollen with child. Her dress, once a pale blue, was now a tattered canvas of dirt and despair. Her hands, clutched low over her distended belly, trembled. Her hair, matted and dull, fell across a face smudged with grime and tears. Yet it was her eyes that caught Eldon. They were vast dark pools devoid of hope, utterly resigned. A quiet, defeated gaze that Eldon knew intimately had seen, reflected in Martha's eyes in her last gasping days. That look. He knew that look of utter final surrender. Look at her. The devil's spawn, that one. A woman shrieked, spitting onto the ground near Lena's worn boots. They say she brings blights. Cursed that last settlement she passed through brought nothing but sickness. I called her tribe wind-talkers, but they withered like dry grass, another bellowed. And look what she carries now, a demon's seed, I tell ye. The taunts rained down a cruel, relentless hail. They called her Kemangyongkwakwi, a carrier of the devil's lineage. Eldon hadn't intended to intervene. His hands remained clasped around the saddle horn of his buckskin horse. He had seen enough cruelty in this West to fill 100 graves. Not my fight, he told himself, the familiar mantra of a man long detached. Not my problem. But Lena didn't flinch. She didn't cry out. She just stood there, her head bowed, her hands pressed protectively over her belly. That quiet, utter resignation. It was too familiar. A raw, unbidden guilt stirred in Eldon's gut, a memory of Martha's fading breath of his own helplessness. He couldn't save his wife, but he could. Maybe, just maybe, he could prevent another soul from being utterly broken by this relentless, indifferent world. How much for the chattel? Eldon's voice, rusty from disuse, cut through the jeers. It was low, gravelly, surprising even himself. The auctioneer, a greasy man with a perpetual sneer, blinked, then grinned. Well, well. A buyer for the cursed. She ain't much missed her, seen better days, and certainly seen less baggage. But for a few dollars she's yours. Take her off our hands." Without another word, Eldon reached into his worn leather pouch. He pulled out a few silver dollars, their clink sharp in the sudden hush, and his grandfather's old well-used pocket-knife, a tool he prized above all else. He laid them on the dusty counter. The knife, a symbol of hard work and practicality, seemed a strange currency for a human life. The auctioneer snatched them up, eyes wide with surprise at the easy transaction. "Take her, then," he grunted, shoving Lena forward. Eldon dismounted, his movements slow, deliberate. He walked to Lena, his shadow falling over her small, trembling form. He didn't offer a hand, didn't utter a comforting word. He simply turned, mounted his horse, and pulled gently on the rough rope now tied to Lena's wrist, connecting her to his saddle. He led her away past the stunned, whispering crowd. Not for love, not for charity, not even for pity, not truly. But because he couldn't stomach seeing that kind of utter cruelty, that kind of familiar defeated despair one more damn time. He had done it. He thought to silence the ghosts that still haunted him. Eldon's ranch was a testament to his solitude. A weathered cabin, a sagging barn, and a perpetually creaking windmill stood stark against the vast, indifferent prairie. No flower bloomed here, no personal touch softened the edges of his existence. It was a place of work, of endurance, and of silence. Lena, tied to his saddle, walked beside his horse, her bare feet kicking up dust, her head still bowed. He led her directly to the small empty bunkhouse beside the main corral, a rough-hewn shed that served as a storage space for tools and feed. It was here, in this house without mirrors, where no reflective surface dared betray a soul's inner turmoil, that Lena would reside. "There's a cot," Eldon grunted, gesturing with his chin. "Water in the bucket. Food will be brought." His voice was devoid of warmth, yet also of malice. He simply provided, and then he left, closing the rough wooden door between them. He told himself he had done his part. He told himself he was free of the sight, free of the guilt. Lena retreated into herself. The bunkhouse was cold, impersonal. She rarely spoke, her voice a thin, reedy sound, barely more than a whisper when she did. Her hands perpetually clasped over her belly were a shield against the world, a desperate attempt to protect the life growing within her. Eldon would leave a plate of beans and jerky outside her door twice a day. She would wait until she heard his footsteps recede, then slip out like a wary coyote, snatch the food, and disappear back into the shadows. He never saw her eat, never caught her eye. He convinced himself this was fine. This was what he wanted. But strange things began almost immediately. One afternoon, Eldon was shaving by the rusty tin basin in his cabin. He glanced at the small, cracked looking-glass on the wall, his own grizzled reflection staring back. A ripple passed through the glass, a sudden unsettling blur like water disturbed by an unseen hand. He frowned, wiped his face, but the mirror cleared. Later, he walked past Lena's bunkhouse. As he did, the small grimy window on its side shimmered, blurring the world behind it for a fleeting instant, then settling back to dull clarity. Eldon paused. A chill unbidden traced its way down his spine. He dismissed it as dust on the glass or a trick of the light, but the sensation lingered. The horses, usually placid, grew restless. Eldon kept them in the corral next to Lena's bunkhouse. At night he'd hear them pawing at the earth, their hooves striking the wooden walls of the corral with sharp, frantic thuds. They would whinny, a high panicked sound, their eyes rolling wildly. When Eldon went to check, he found them huddled in the far corner, trembling, their breath misting in the cold air. They refused to approach the bunkhouse wall, bucking and snorting if he tried to lead them near. "What in tarnation?" he muttered, baffled. He checked for snakes, for coyotes, for anything that might spook them. Nothing. Just an unseen dread that made their hides ripple and their eyes gleam with terror. And then there were the doors. Every night, precisely at midnight, Eldon's cabin door, which he meticulously latched and barred, would creak open. just a fraction enough for a cold draft to seep in, for the sounds of the night to intrude. He'd wake with a start, grab his rifle, and find nothing. No tracks, no sign of an intruder. He'd curse, resecure the door, and drift back to sleep, only for it to happen again the next night. He even placed heavy stones against it, but they were simply pushed aside, resting innocently on the porch. Something was happening. Something beyond rational explanation. The climax of these strange happenings arrived on a night when the wind howled like a banshee. Eldon, exhausted by the relentless mystery, drifted into a fitful sleep. He woke with a jolt, a cold pressure on his neck. His eyes snapped open. He could just make out in the dimness the rough, familiar texture of the well rope coiled too loosely around his throat. It wasn't tight. It wasn't choking him. But it was there. He sat up with a gasp, knocking it away. He stumbled to his feet, heart hammering. No one could have entered his cabin. No one could have done this. A profound, chilling dread seeped into his bones. He burst out of his cabin, half expecting to see some spectral figure. The bunkhouse door was ajar. He stormed over, kicking it open. Lena was huddled on her cot, trembling, her face pale as a ghost in the moonlight. Her eyes were wide, filled with a raw, desperate terror that mirrored his own. "I'm sorry," she whimpered, her voice a fragile reed. She spoke in her tribal tongue, words Eldon didn't understand, but the despair was universal. I don't know why, it just happens." She was inconsolable, her shoulders shaking, tears streaming down her face. She sounded truly terrified, not of Eldon, but of what was happening. Eldon stared at her, then at the open door, then at the strange, shimmering air around her. He had expected anger, defiance, maybe even a confession. Not this. Not pure, helpless terror. He looked down at his calloused hand, then slowly, almost clumsily, reached into his pocket. He pulled out a worn, surprisingly clean handkerchief, Martha still carrying a faint scent of lavender from years ago. Without a word, without a question, he simply offered it to her. Lena looked at the cloth, then at his hand, then up at his face. The familiar, defeated look in her eyes softened, then widened with a flicker of disbelief. A single tear, not of fear, but of something else, traced a path down her cheek. She took the handkerchief, and from that moment something shifted. Not just between them, but in the very air of the ranch. The strange happenings, though not entirely gone, began to ebb, to grow quieter, as if the land itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what kindness could bloom in this desolate place. The moon hung heavy and full over Eldon's ranch, casting long, stark shadows that danced with the whispering sagebrush. Inside the bunkhouse, a different kind of shadow play was unfolding. Lena's time had come. There were no screams, no conventional cries of pain, only low guttural moans that seemed to vibrate from deeper within her, a sound less human and more akin to the earth itself groaning. Her body, taut and trembling, was consumed by a silent, primal agony. She clutched the worn blanket Eldon had given her, her knuckles white, and through clenched teeth she whispered a name over and over again, syllables that Eldon didn't recognize. Sounds that seemed to stretch beyond common tongue, perhaps from the ancient language of the Anla, her tribe, the Wind Talkers. Eldon had ridden hard for the nearest settlement, returning with a grizzled old woman, Ms. Gable, who served as the local midwife. She was a woman hardened by the frontier, accustomed to blood and birth and the unpredictable nature of life in the West. But the moment Ms. Gable laid a hand on Lena's distended belly, her eyes snapped open wide and disbelieving. She recoiled as if burned, a strangled gasp escaping her lips. "My lord above," Ms. Gable croaked, her face ashen, her usually steady hands trembling violently. She stumbled backward, bumping into a post. "That thing, it ain't no baby. It's looking at me." Her voice rose to a terrified screech. "It's looking right through me. I ain't touching that. That's the devil's own spawn." She fled the bunkhouse, tripping over her own feet, her terrified screams echoing across the silent ranch as she scrambled onto her horse and galloped away into the moonlit darkness, leaving Lena and Eldon alone once more. Lena lay there exhausted, tears silently tracing paths through the grime on her cheeks. "She saw it," Lena whispered, her voice raw. "They always see it, and they always run." Eldon stood frozen, the midwife's words chilling him to the bone. "What in God's name?" he murmured, looking from the open door to Lena's pained face. But the sight of her so utterly alone and abandoned once again pushed his fear aside. He was all she had. He was all it had. He knelt by her side, pushing stray hair from her forehead. "Just breathe, Lena. You're all right. I'm here." Hours later, as the first pale sliver of dawn bled across the horizon, the child was born. It emerged not with a cry, but with an unsettling, profound silence. Eldon, wiping away the blood and fluid, looked down. Its eyes were open, vast, and unnervingly still black, as a volcanic ash reflecting the dim lantern light like obsidian pools. It didn't blink. It didn't cry. It simply observed. Its tiny chest rose and fell with slow, deliberate breaths, but its gaze, ancient and piercing, seemed to take in every shadow, every crack in the wooden walls, every line on Eldon's weathered face. A hush settled over the bunkhouse, so profound it felt like the air itself had solidified. For the first 3 nights the ranch felt unbalanced. The lantern in Eldon's cabin would flicker and die for no reason, plunging him into sudden darkness. The well water, usually clear, turned murky and tasted of earth. Yet the unsettling occurrences around the bunkhouse, the horses' panic, the doors creaking open, had ceased. The child nestled in its makeshift swaddling didn't rage, didn't harm. It merely watched. Eldon, unable to sleep, found himself sitting on a stool beside the cot, watching it in return. He felt a strange pull, a reluctant fascination. This creature, this silent black-eyed thing, filled the emptiness of his ranch with an unnerving presence. One evening, Eldon found himself rummaging through an old trunk, pulling out a collection of dusty books. They were Martha's, filled with poetry and tales of far-off lands. He found a worn copy of Shakespeare. He began to read, his voice rough and dry from disuse filling the bunkhouse. He read of kings and fools of love and betrayal of life and death, his gruff tone surprisingly gentle. He told it stories too gruff, tales of his own youth, of the wide-open prairie, of Martha's soft laughter, of cornfields rippling under the summer sun. The child didn't react, didn't stir, but its black eyes remained fixed on him, seemingly absorbing every vibration, every inflection, every quiet emotion he unknowingly poured into the desolate air. Eldon, for the first time in years, found himself talking not to the empty air, but to a silent listener. He wasn't sure why. Perhaps it was loneliness. Perhaps it was a desperate attempt to simply fill the unsettling silence the child brought. Lena, weak, but with a new, fierce light in her eyes, watched him from her cot. One afternoon, as Eldon finished a poem about a lost soul, finding its way home, she whispered, her voice thin but clear. "It doesn't understand the world, Eldon, not like us." Her hand, fragile and translucent, reached for his. "It just copies." Her gaze shifted to the black-eyed infant, then back to Eldon's face. It's a hollow spirit from the first moon. My mother, a seer, she spoke of them. Pure energy shaped by what they absorb. A faint, almost imperceptible shimmer seemed to pass through the air around them. And you're the first it's watched and not feared. She explained about the Anla, her tribe, and their reverence for the first moon, how her mother was a seer. She spoke of her mother's final warning about a power awakening, and how Lena now feared this child was born into violence and at risk of becoming evil. Her voice held a newfound strength, a desperate hope clinging to the man who chose to read poetry, to a silent, watching void. The stillness of Eldon's ranch, once a sanctuary of lonely peace, shattered with the arrival of whispers. Like dry leaves scuttling across the parched earth, rumors of the devil's spawn, born in the distant hills, began to spread. The tale, twisted and bloated with fear, spoke of a rancher who harbored an unnatural child, a thing with eyes black as night, capable of turning well water murky and spooking horses into fits. Eldon heard snippets from the few brave souls who still ventured near his property, their faces tight with superstition. "Heard old Pike's got a cursed thing out there," a passing prospector muttered one day, refusing to meet Eldon's gaze. "Bringing blight, they say." The first to come were the children of the reversal. They arrived like shadows lengthening in the afternoon sun. 3 riders cloaked in somber dark robes that seemed to drink the light. Their faces, gaunt and severe, were etched with a fanatic's conviction. They were zealous, believing the child to be a corruption, a seed of chaos that must be purged before it matured into an unstoppable calamity. They dismounted with a quiet, menacing grace. The leader, a tall man with eyes that burned with cold fire, stepped forward. "Eldon Pike." His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "We have come for the abomination. It is a scourge upon this world. It must be cleansed." Eldon, standing on his porch with his rusted rifle held loosely, felt a familiar tremor of cold dread. "There's no abomination here," he said, his voice as rough as old timber. "Only a child shaped by darkness, born of sin." Another cloaked figure hissed, their hand twitching towards a hidden blade. "We know what it is. We feel its corruption. Give it to us, old man, and we will grant it the peace of oblivion." "It's just a baby." Lena's voice, surprisingly steady, drifted from the bunkhouse doorway where she stood, pale but resolute. Her arm was wrapped protectively around the bundle within. "It hasn't hurt anyone." The leader's eyes narrowed. "Its very existence is a plague. It warps the land. It breeds discord. Its nature is destruction. Its nature is what it sees." Lena countered her gaze, unwavering. Eldon felt a surge of pride and a deeper protectiveness for her. He remembered her words. "It just copies." The children of the reversal pressed closer, their fanaticism a palpable weight. Eldon raised his rifle slightly. "Get off my land." Then came the keepers of the flame. They were fewer, only 2, but their arrival was marked by an almost unsettling elegance. Dressed in fine-tailored suits, their movements were fluid, their smiles practiced and disarming. They moved with a chilling assurance, like predators confident in their prey. They believed the child to be a tool, a vessel of immense power to be cultivated, a key to resurrecting their own age of fire, a dark era of dominance. The first of them, a woman with eyes like polished onyx and a voice like honeyed silk, approached. "My dear Eldon," she purred, her gaze sweeping over him with unnerving intensity. "We apologize for our zealous friends. They lack finesse. We, however, understand the gift you possess." She gestured to the bunkhouse. "That child is a rare jewel, a living conduit. With proper guidance, it could usher in a new era of prosperity, of power beyond imagining. For us, for you, we offer protection." The man with her added, his voice smooth as riverstone. "Guidance, an empire built on raw energy, not the savagery these zealots propose." He eyed the children of the reversal with thinly veiled disdain. A tense standoff ensued, a silent war of ideologies played out on Eldon's dusty ranch. The children of the reversal saw annihilation. The keepers of the flame saw dominion. Eldon saw a choice sharp and clear between 2 different kinds of chains. During a tense brief skirmish between the 2 factions, a flash of hidden blades and strange shimmering energy, Lena was caught in the crossfire. A sharp cry, a sickening thud. Eldon rushed to her, finding her slumped against the bunkhouse wall, a dark stain blossoming on her side. The shock of it, the raw unfairness, ignited a new kind of fury in him. He carried her into the storm cellar, a cramped, damp refuge beneath the cabin, laying her gently on a pile of old sacks. The baby, nestled in its swaddling, began to stir, sensing the chaos. Its black eyes widened and a low hum vibrated from its tiny body. The air around it began to crackle, the ground beneath Eldon's feet faintly trembling. It was on the verge of unleashing something primal, something vast and terrifying. Eldon, clutching Lena's hand, looked at the child, its innocent face contorted by the resonating fear and violence. "No," Eldon whispered, his voice rough but firm, pulling the child closer. He wrapped his free hand around its tiny, powerful fist, holding it steady. "You're still my boy, not theirs." He looked at Lena, then back at the baby. He wasn't pleading. He was stating a truth. The hum around the child slowly subsided. The crackling dissipated. Its tiny hand, still clenched in Eldon's, relaxed. The black eyes, so full of nascent power a moment before, softened, focusing intently on Eldon's face. It took a slow, deliberate breath, and then surprisingly it yawned, a silent, tiny stretch. And with a soft sigh, it drifted off to sleep in Eldon's arms, the chaotic energy of the outside world momentarily subdued by the simple, unwavering presence of a man's touch. It wasn't the violent explosion the factions expected. It was a profound, quiet stillness. It was learning. The dawn broke over Eldon's ranch not with the gentle blush of a new day, but with a blood-orange hue, as if the sun itself bled across the horizon. A new kind of dust, not just from the wind, stirred on the horizon, the telltale sign of many riders. Both factions returned their intent, no longer cloaked in shadows or honeyed words. The children of the reversal, now a grim legion of 20, moved with the chilling purpose of fanatics, their dark robes stark against the burgeoning light. Behind them, the keepers of the flame, an equally formidable force, rode with a cold, calculating grace, their refined clothing a stark contrast to their ruthless ambition. They spread out, encircling the ranch, a noose tightening around Eldon's world. Lena, weak from her wound, but her eyes blazing with fierce maternal instinct, clung to Eldon in the storm cellar. "They're here," she whispered, her voice a brittle thread. "Both of them. They want him, Eldon. They want his power." The child nestled between them stirred. Its black eyes, once a void, now seemed to hold a flicker of the approaching storm, an internal energy humming beneath the surface. "I know," Eldon rumbled, his hand surprisingly steady, stroking Lena's hair. He looked at the child, then at the wooden door of the cellar, the only thing separating them from the coming storm. "But he's not theirs." He pressed a kiss to the child's forehead, a rare, tender gesture for a man built of stone. "He's ours." He placed the child gently into Lena's arms, their last, most precious burden. Then Eldon Pike, a lone figure against the encroaching tide, stepped out of the cellar and onto the porch. The rising sun caught the rust on his old rifle, making it glow with a deceptive warmth. He stood framed in the doorway, a solitary sentinel, his silhouette etched against the violent sky. His eyes, usually weary, held a startling clarity, a fierce resolve that had replaced fear. The leader of the children of the reversal. A gaunt, hawk-nosed man rode forward. "Eldon Pike, give us the abomination, we will not ask again." His voice cracked like a whip across the still morning. "He learns from me." Eldon's voice, though rough, carried across the space firm as bedrock. "You ain't touching him." From the other side, the elegant woman from the Keepers of the Flame advanced, her smile chillingly calm. "Mr. Pike, be reasonable. That entity is a force of nature. It belongs to a higher purpose. To us. Not to your meager ranch." She extended a gloved hand as if offering salvation. "We offer power, not destruction. Choose wisely." Eldon didn't waver. He simply shifted the rifle, his thumb brushing the trigger. "My choice is made." A collective gasp rose from both factions. Then chaos erupted. The gaunt leader of the children of the reversal screamed, "Then perish with it, old man," and spurred his horse forward, drawing a wicked hooked blade. His fanatics charged behind him, their cries echoing across the prairie. Eldon braced himself, but it wasn't his shot that broke the world. From within the shadow of the doorway where Lena held him tight, the child's black eyes snapped open. They weren't just observing now. They were focusing. A low, almost imperceptible hum vibrated in the air. The attacking zealot, mid-charge, let out a choked cry. His horse bucked wildly, throwing him. And then the earth beneath him didn't just crack, it fractured. A jagged fissure ripped through the dry ground, swallowing the screaming man whole, leaving only a cloud of dust and the lingering scent of ozone. The ground swallowed him like a quicksand trap. Silence, shock, terror rippled through both factions. This wasn't Eldon's doing. This was the child. Lena, her face pale, her voice a fragile whisper from the doorway, caught Eldon's eye. "If you give it up," she said, her words imbued with generations of Anla wisdom, "it becomes what they want, a weapon, a monster." Her gaze dropped to the child, then back to Eldon. "But if you raise it, Eldon, if you teach it, it becomes what it sees." Eldon didn't reply to Lena. He didn't need to. He knew. He simply pulled the child closer, holding him tight against his chest, tucking the small head under his chin. The tremor in the ground subsided, the raw power ebbing, yielding to the familiar warmth of his embrace. He sat down on the top step of the porch, the old wood groaning beneath his weight. The factions, still reeling, watched him, baffled by his calm. He ignored them. He began to speak, his voice low, a rhythmic murmur. He wasn't talking to them. He was talking to the child. "There was a field, little one." Eldon began, his eyes fixed on the distant horizon. "Back when your mother and I were young. A green, green field smelled of summer rain and wild clover. The remaining children of the reversal, their fanaticism momentarily broken by raw, undeniable fear, turned their horses and scattered, fleeing the mysterious earth-shattering power. The keepers of the flame, though intrigued, also retreated, their calculating minds recognizing that this tool was not yet controllable, too wild to be simply taken. They would watch. They would wait. The child nestled in Eldon's arms, its black eyes half closed, drifted into a peaceful sleep, as Eldon's voice, raspy but steady, painted pictures of green fields and open skies. There was no sound of war bells, no triumphant shout. Only the quiet, profound hum of a choice made, a silent vow, whispered between a man and a child, witnessed only by the rising sun and the vast, ancient land. The sun dipped below the jagged horizon, painting the sky in hues of deep violet and fading orange. Inside the storm cellar, Lena's breath came in shallow, rattling gasps. Her wound, though cleaned by Eldon, had festered, a grim testament to the violence she had endured. Eldon sat beside her, the black-eyed child sleeping soundly in his arms. He knew. The quiet acceptance in Lena's eyes, the faint knowing smile playing on her lips, told him all he needed to know. The battle for the child was won, but at a cost. "He's beautiful, Eldon," Lena whispered, her voice a fragile wisp barely audible over the child's soft breathing. Her fingers, translucent against the fading light, reached out to touch the boy's cheek. So quiet. Eldon nodded, his own throat tight. "He is." Lena's eyes, filled with a profound, peaceful wisdom, met his. "You didn't save me, Eldon," she murmured, her gaze unwavering. "You showed him how to begin." Her hand dropped limp, her breathing ceased. A final peaceful sigh, and she was gone. The silence in the cellar deepened, a vast, aching emptiness. Eldon buried Lena beneath the lone gnarled oak tree that stood defiantly on his land, its branches reaching like skeletal arms towards the sky. It was the only living thing that truly thrived on his desolate ranch, a symbol of stubborn resilience. He dug the grave himself, the earth hard and unyielding, just like his own grief. The black-eyed boy didn't cry. He watched, his gaze fixed on Eldon, then on the mound of fresh earth. The next morning and every morning after, the boy would silently place a single vibrant wildflower on the grave, a small vibrant splash of color against the stark brown earth, an act of remembrance he had learned from Eldon's own quiet morning. Years blurred into a weathered tapestry of sun-baked days and star-dusted nights. The ranch, once a place of loneliness, transformed. The well water remained clear. The horses, though still wary of strangers, were calm. The land under the boy's subtle unconscious influence seemed to soften, to yield more readily. The wild grasses grew taller, the sagebrush thicker. Rumors like tumbleweeds caught on the wind still drifted into nearby settlements. They spoke of a monster with eyes like night, living with a strange old man in the isolated hills. Fear kept most away. Those who saw the occasional fleeting glimpse of the boy, tall, now lean, his black eyes unsettlingly intense, would cross themselves and hurry on. But no one dared come closer. No one dared challenge them again. The children of the reversal and the keepers of the flame, their initial zeal thwarted, had retreated content to watch from afar, convinced the child was either contained or awaiting a future destiny. One crisp autumn afternoon, Eldon, his hair now white as winter snow, rode his old buckskin horse across the vast prairie, the boy, now a silent, observant teenager, riding effortlessly beside him on a wild mustang he had somehow tamed without a bridle. Their shadows stretched long and thin across the golden grasses, two solitary figures moving in unison with the ancient land. "I don't know what the hell you are," Eldon said, his voice raspy with age and quiet contentment, his gaze fixed on the endless horizon. He glanced at the boy, whose black eyes reflected the vast blue sky. "A spirit from the moon," Lina said. "A force of nature." He paused, a comfortable silence stretching between them. "But you've never made me ashamed of calling you son." The boy, who rarely spoke, turned his head slowly. His lips, usually still curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. He said nothing, but the warmth in his eyes, a depth that transcended their darkness, spoke volumes. He was not a god. He was not a devil. He was simply a boy who had been loved first. And in this untamed West, where destiny was often forged in fire and blood, perhaps that was power enough. The future, boundless and unwritten, stretched before them like the endless prairie waiting for their unique story to unfold.